Hey, what's up, guys? Welcome to the channel. UFC 283, Glover Teixeira versus Jamahal Hill for the light heavyweight title is just a couple weeks away. And this is going to be my top 3 reasons I hate UFC 283. And I also have a couple honorable mentions. This is the first UFC pay-per-view card since the inception of this video idea back at UFC 279. That I've really had a lot to pick apart with this card. So I have a top 3. I'm going to go from 3 to 1. 1 being the reason I most hate UFC 283. And then also I have those couple honorable mentions because there's a lot to dislike about UFC 283. We're going to get to that in a second. But do me a favor, guys. Comment down below and let me know what reasons do you hate UFC 283. And also, I'm going to be doing a video, the top 3 reasons I love UFC 283. And also, I'm going to be doing a video grading UFC 283, looking over the main card of UFC 283, talking about each fight, and then giving it a grade on a scale from 1 to 10 and answering the question whether or not you should purchase UFC 283. So if you're interested in those videos, do me a favor, subscribe to the channel, turn on notifications. I would greatly appreciate it. And if you love these videos, top 3 reasons I hate, top 3 reasons I love, do me a favor and like the video. I would greatly appreciate it. So starting off with the honorable mention, and just so you guys know, with these videos, the reasons are never, oh, this is a terrible fight card. This is a horrible main card. This is a horrible main event. I dig deeper than that and give you legitimate reasons that I dislike this card. Do not get me wrong. Am I still excited for UFC 283? Yes, I am. Are there still some great fights on UFC 283? Yes, I am. But the 3 reasons I'm going to show you, and I actually have a couple more, it's probably going to be like more like 5 or 6 reasons I hate, are all legitimate reasons. And I'm curious, let me know about down below what you think. So starting off with the first honorable mention, and these kind of all go together, but the prelims just do not look that great. I mean, Brad Tavares versus Gregory Rodriguez is a great fight. That's the best prelim on the card. But you know, outside of that, I mean, there's another fight we're going to talk about here in a second, so I'm not going to spoil that. But the early prelims are just looking terrible. I mean, you know, Warley Alves, Nicholas Dalby isn't that great. I mean, you got Terrence McKinney, but these prelims are lackluster. I understand it's the prelims, but with the last few months, you know, with UFC 280, 281, and even 282, we've been getting really stacked prelims, and looking at 283, it really jumped out to me how scarce the prelims were. Another honorable mention, and this kind of goes along with the prelims thing, I'm really disappointed. We were supposed to get Thiago Moises versus Guram Kutateladze. Guram had to pull out. I'm not sure if it's an injury or what. It was undisclosed. I was really looking forward to this lightweight matchup, and UFC 283's prelims really needed this matchup. I mean, this was great matchmaking by the UFC. I will crap on the UFC time and time again for terrible matchmaking, but this was a perfect fight. Thiago Moises versus Guram Kutateladze was a spectacular matchup that I was really looking forward to. I believe the lightweight division is the second most stacked division in all the UFC, and I think Guram is one of those fighters who, you know, if he was thrown into a title fight, even though Guram is unranked, if he was thrown into a title fight tomorrow, I think he would have a chance. That's how good I think he is. And Thiago Moises, I know he's had a couple losses. He lost to Islam Makhachev, the current lightweight champion, went 4 rounds with him. But this was one of those fights where it was a top-tier fight between 2 unranked lightweights, and I'm super disappointed it's not happening. The other honorable mention I have is, why is Shogun Rua still fighting? I think he's won 2 out of his last 6. He got finished in his last fight. He looks terrible out there. I'm not looking forward to seeing Shogun Rua. I think he's 41 years old, but in fight years, he's like 70 years old. He's taken a lot of damage. And for me, to see him out there just collecting a check against an opponent that's, you know, nobody even really knows, and, you know, there's a chance that Shogun goes out there and gets brutally KO'd. It's just disappointing to me. I wish he would retire. It's a legend of the sport. A former light heavyweight champion. It just hurts to see, and it definitely shouldn't be headlining the prelims. Like I said, the best prelim we currently have is Brad Tavares versus Gregory Rodriguez. There is some other prelims, you know, that are decent, but these prelims are vastly lacking. The other honorable mention, because again, And this almost made the list. I debated about making this number 3 and making number 3 an honorable mention. But the other honorable mention, before I even get into the list, again, this could have been a top 6, top 5 list. The UFC is raising the price of the pay-per-view on ESPN Plus to $80. So now, where I am, if I buy the pay-per-view, it's basically $85, including tax. And I know a lot of people are going to say, who buys pay-per-views? Some people do buy pay-per-views, okay? And a couple years ago, back in, I think it's 2019, you used to be able to go on the PlayStation Store and order a UFC pay-per-view for $50. It is now $85. That is a $35 price increase over 3 years. That is disturbing. And I think what makes it an extra gut punch is the fact that this card in particular isn't crazy stacked. You know, I could understand they said, okay, we're raising the price at UFC 280. We're raising the price at UFC 281. Both stacked cards. Even UFC 282 was pretty solid. I understand the main event fell out last minute. But to raise the price for a card like UFC 283, which is kind of lackluster, it's not the worst card ever, don't get me wrong, but it's kind of lackluster. To raise it, now we're paying $85 for a pay-per-view. It's just super disappointing. Okay, moving on to the top 3 reasons, the actual top 3 reasons I hate UFC 283, starting off with number 3. And I hate to say this, but the number 3 reason I hate UFC 283 is Neil Magny's hairline. And I like Neil Magny. He's a good fighter. It's like the UFC 200 goldish yellow canvas. Aesthetically, I just don't want to look at it. It's going to ruin my night. I do not want to see Neil Magny's hairline on the UFC 283 card. It's the featured fight on the card. And, you know, combining with that, I think the matchup is terrible. Gilbert Burns versus Neil Magny is terrible. I would have much rather seen Gilbert Burns. Gilbert Burns is number 5. Neil Magny is number 12. The fight makes absolutely no sense. I know some of these guys are booked, just recently got rescheduled and switched around. I would have much rather seen Gilbert Burns, Colby Covington. I would have much rather seen Gilbert Burns, Khamzat Chimaev too. I would have much rather seen Gilbert Burns, Bilal Muhammad. Gilbert Burns, Jeff Neal. I know Jeff Neal pulled out of his fight with Shavkat recently, but it got rebooked for March. I would have much rather seen Gilbert Burns versus Shavkat Rakhmonov. You know, there was a litany of fighters that he could have fought. Even Jorge Masvidal, but I guess Jorge Masvidal's too busy out pretending that he's some politician or something. You know, he's ducking fights. Ever since he flying knee KO'd Ben Askren, he thinks he's some type of big shot, turning down fights left and right, begging for, you know, his 3rd title shot off of a win over Nate Diaz, who's no longer even with the organization. So it's just super unfortunate. The only reason that Gilbert Burns, number 5 in the world, versus number 12, Neil Magny, is happening is just purely based to get Gilbert Burns on the card in Brazil. And I just don't like this matchup. It's a disappointing matchup. Would much rather see Gilbert Burns fight almost anyone else in the division. And on top of that, we have to stomach looking at Neil Magny's hairline. I wish somebody would tell him, just go bald. Please, for the love of God, just go bald. I can't look at it anymore. It's like that UFC 200 canvas. I just don't want to look at it. It ruins my night. So, you know, that fight is unfortunate. Moving up to the number 2 reason I hate UFC 283, and that is because Lauren Murphy is on the main card of UFC 283. We're getting Lauren Murphy versus Jessica Andrade in the women's flyweight division. And the UFC, the matchmakers or the card builders or whatever you want to say, I'm not sure who actually, you know, makes the bout order. This should not be on the main card. They already tried to force us Lauren Murphy versus Miesha Tate. They tried to force that on the UFC 276, the Israel Adesanya, Jarrett Cannonier main card. Luckily, thank you to the MMA gods, I think it was Lauren Murphy pulled out last second and ended up getting pushed to a fight night card a couple weeks later, something along those lines. But now they're back at it. And while I believe Lauren Murphy versus Jessica Andrade is infinitely better than Lauren Murphy versus Miesha Tate, I still don't want to see it on the main card. I would much prefer, you know, Gregory Rodriguez on the main card. I mean, that is an amazing prelim. Why not put Gregory Rodriguez versus Brad Tavares on the main card? Great prelim fight. Gregory Rodriguez is always super exciting. But instead, we got to watch Lauren Murphy versus Jessica Andrade. And I know Jessica Andrade is typically a fun fighter, but Lauren Murphy's not getting a title shot anytime soon. Jessica Andrade is not getting a title shot anytime soon. You know, I don't think this fight is going to be particularly great. It's not particularly meaningful. And why throw this on the main card of UFC 283 when you have I would have rather Terrence McKinney been on the main card. But instead, we're going to have to stomach this lackluster, unfortunate matchup between Lauren Murphy and Jessica Andrade. And that is why that's my number 2 reason on the list. Moving on to my number 1 reason I hate UFC 283. And if you watched my initial video for UFC 282, the reasons I hate UFC 282, you would know what this number 1 reason is already, because it was actually the number 1 reason on that list as well. But then the card got shifted around. And the main event of UFC 283 is Glover Teixeira versus Jamahal Hill for the vacant light heavyweight title. And the number 1 reason I hate this fight card is because if Glover Teixeira wins, he may retire with the belt and we will still have a vacant light heavyweight title. You go back to UFC 282 in December. The original main event was Yuri Prochazka versus Glover Teixeira 2 for the light heavyweight title. Yuri Prochazka gets a dramatic shoulder injury, has to pull out of the fight card. They try to do Glover Teixeira versus Magomed Ankalaev. Glover says, I don't want that fight on short notice. So they elevate the co-main event, which was Jan Blachowicz versus Magomed Ankalaev, to the main event. They fight. It ends up being a draw. I thought Ankalaev won, but I wasn't mad at the draw. I did not think the draw was a terrible decision. Dana White hated the fight. He hated the decision. He was angry. He had a vacant belt at light heavyweight. Magomed Ankalaev's not fighting for a while. Jan Blachowicz is not fighting for a while. So he said, you know what? We'll go to the next contender, which is Jamahal Hill, and we'll let him fight Glover Teixeira, who deserved the title shot anyway. It was the most deserving, but because of the unforeseen circumstances, missed out on it. And we're going to book it for the headliner of UFC 283 because it already needs a headliner. Glover Teixeira is 43. He'll be 44 in 2023. If he wins this fight, he wins his light heavyweight championship back. He's in Brazil. Could you write a, more of a fairy tale ending for Glover Teixeira? I love Glover. Don't get me wrong. Do not get me wrong. I love Glover Teixeira. But it would be super unfortunate to watch him grab the light heavyweight title, even though I would feel so great for him, in Brazil, retire in the octagon, and then we are left with a vacant light heavyweight title. And I know this fight can go either way. Glover Teixeira may maul Jamahal Hill on the ground and submit him or finish him via ground and pound, but Jamahal Hill has nuclear power in both his hands. I could see him putting out Glover Teixeira. But if Glover wins, I think there's like a 60-70% chance he's in front of his Brazilian fans. It's a fairy tale ending. I think he may tell, if Joe Rogan's even there, he may not even be there since he's in Brazil. He may just retire right there in the cage. And then we'll have a dilemma because essentially the entire light heavyweight division is now just destroyed. Glover retires with the belt. Jamahal Hill now has a loss in this hypothetical scenario. Rakic is coming off an injury. Magomed Ankalaev and Jan Blachowicz just fought, so they're not going to be back for a while. Yuri Prochazka may not be back till the end of 2023. So you really have no contenders right now. You have nobody you can even make fight for the belt and make a reasonable case. I guess you would do Ankalaev versus Blachowicz too and crown a championship. But it just leaves the division in absolute peril. And that's why it's my number 1 reason I hate UFC 283, because as much as I would be so happy for Glover Teixeira, it would just absolutely wreck the UFC light heavyweight division, which we were just starting to get some clarity with Yuri Prochazka. We were starting to get some distance from John Jones's shadow. And, he injures his shoulder 2 weeks before the fight at UFC 282. And now with Glover Teixeira potentially winning at UFC 283, will throw the whole entire division right back into shambles. So let me know what you guys think about all these reasons I have. Do me a favor, don't forget to like the video, and thank you so much for watching.